With question 90 of the Summa Theologia, this, of course, being in the Treatise on Man, we see a little bit of a transition that St. Thomas Aquinas starts to make, because now, having treated of the soul and the intellect and the will and all these various parts of man's rational soul and even parts of his sensitive soul, he's now starting to transition to the first man and what basically Adam and Eve and what it was like when God created the first man and man in general. And also there's going to be an interesting question about the creation of women. And it's some really fascinating questions that are coming over the next few days. So question 90 says, of the first production of man's soul. Now, it's interesting, the wording here, of the first production of man's soul. It doesn't say of the production of the first man's soul, so I find the wording to be interesting, although, is he talking about the production of Adam and Eve and their soul, or is he talking about, I don't know. But at any rate, I think he is talking about the soul in general and how that is created by God. How is it different from the creation of the brute creatures' souls? And you're going to find something really interesting later on in this question. There's only 4 articles. Is that Thomas is going to disagree with Augustine. And I've mentioned before, he hates to do this. He hates to disagree with Augustine on anything, but in Article 4, he's going to do it. He's going to disagree with Augustine, and you'll see how much, even in the language that he uses, he hates to do it. And so the first article here says whether the soul was made or was of God's substance. So God is his substance, right? Okay, so God is existence, as we've talked about many times. So he's saying here, is the soul of man of that same substance of God? And you might initially say, I don't think so, because, God is so much higher than us. He transcends us. And if that was your first thought, well, you're exactly right, because that's what Thomas is going to do and say, and he's going to give a few reasons for this. He says, to say that the soul is of the divine substance involves a manifest improbability. Now, notice he didn't say it's not, but he basically, that's what he's going to mean. For, as it is clear from what has been said, the human soul is sometimes in a state of potentiality to the active intelligence, acquires its knowledge somehow from things, and thus has various powers. Okay, so God can't have various powers. God is all one, right? All of which are incompatible with the divine nature, which is a pure act, receives nothing from any other, and admits of no variety of itself, as we have proved. This error seems to have originated from 2 statements of the ancients. So remember, Thomas has mentioned this before. They supposed that nothing but bodies existed. Okay, they were materialists. Therefore, they said that God was a body, which they considered to be the principle of other bodies. According to this supposition, also, the Manichaeans, thinking that God was corporeal light, held that the soul was part of that light bound up with the body. And so this is one of the things I love about reading the Summa, is you get like a history of philosophy, a history of theology from the greatest Christian thinker of all time, St. Thomas Aquinas. And so it's interesting how he does name names, and he talks about these various heretics and what they taught. Then a further step in advance was made, and some surmised the existence of something incorporeal, not apart from the body, but the form of a body, so that Varro said, I've never heard of this Varro, V-A-R-R-O, God is a soul governing the world by movement and reason. So some supposed man's soul to be part of that one soul, as man is part of the whole world. Now this is kind of pantheistic. I'm thinking of Baruch Spinoza, who one of the early rationalist thinkers, and also Hegel kind of fell into this trap a little bit as well, being somewhat pantheistic. For they were unable to go so far as to understand the different degrees of spiritual substance except according to the distinction of bodies. But all these theories are impossible. So now the language gets stronger. Wherefore it is evidently false that the soul is of the substance of God. Article 2, whether the soul was produced by creation. The rational soul can be made only by creation, which, however, is not true of other forms. Okay, other forms would be like other creatures, right? the forms of other creatures like a dog or a caterpillar or a snake. The reason is because since to be made is the way to existence, a thing must be made in such a way as is suitable to its mode of existence. Now that properly exists, which itself has existence, as it were, subsisting in its own existence. And so you remember early on in our treatise on man, Thomas proclaimed that the human soul is subsistent. It can live in its own. In fact, yesterday we were talking about the knowledge of the separated soul, right? Wherefore, only substances are properly and truly called beings, whereas an accident has not existence, but something is modified by it in so far as it is called a being. For instance, whiteness is called a being because by it something is white. Hence it is said in metaphysics, which is Aristotle, that an accident should be described as of something rather than as something. So there's nothing white in it. There's no, white is a description of things. It's something that's added on to something else, right? You can't just have, whiteness, I guess, could be in Plato's realm of forms, but it's always added on. It's an accident, right? The same is to be said of non-subsistent forms. Therefore, properly speaking, it does not belong to any non-existing form to be made, but such are to be made through the composite substances being made. So when a dog is created, the matter and the form are together at the same time. They're one and the same. They're inseparable, because when one ceases to exist, they both cease to exist. So they're not separate. Neither of them is subsistent. They're always going to be found together. On the other hand, the rational soul is a subsistent form, wherefore it is competent to be and to be made. And since it cannot be made of pre-existing matter, whether corporeal, which would render it a corporeal thing, or spiritual, which would involve the transmutation of one spiritual substance into another, we must conclude that it cannot exist except by creation. Okay, so the soul must be created by God. Article 3, whether the rational soul is produced by God immediately. And what he's going to get at here is that I'll read it. Some have held that angels, acting by the power of God, produce rational souls. But this is quite impossible and against faith, for it has been proved that the rational soul cannot be produced except by creation, which is what we learned in the very last article. Now, God alone can create, for the first agent alone can act without presupposing the existence of anything, while the second cause always presupposes something derived from the first cause. Okay, so you go back to the proofs for the existence of God, and the second one was the uncaused cause, which is God, so it all kind of connects, right? God alone acts by creation. Since therefore the rational soul cannot be produced by a change in matter, it cannot be produced save immediately by God. Now this is the final article, and this is the one where Thomas is going to disagree with Augustine, and it's really just listen to the language and how it pains him to do this. And okay, first he's going to disagree with Origen, which I don't think Thomas has a problem with, because Origen got so many things wrong. Whether the human soul was produced before the body. Interesting, right? They are separate. They come together as a composite, but they are not as united as in a dog or a caterpillar soul, right? Origen held that not only the soul of the first man, but also all the souls of all men were created at the same time as the angels. Okay, that means all these souls are kind of floating around before they got united to bodies, before their bodies, because he thought that all spiritual substances, whether souls or angels, are equal in their natural condition and differ only by merit, so that some of them, namely the souls of men or of heavenly bodies, are united to bodies, while others remain in their different orders entirely free from matter. Remember how he said this was a punishment. A punishment of the angels was to get a body. And so we, according to Origen, would be punished angels because we're given a body, much less an earthworm or a mouse. Well, they're really, really being punished. Okay, their souls are uniting to something really, really low. Augustine, however, says that the soul of the first man was created at the same time as the angels, before the body for another reason, because he supposes that the body of man during the work of the 6 days was produced not actually, but only as to some causal virtues, which cannot be said of the soul, because neither was it made of any pre-existing corporeal or spiritual matter, nor could it be produced from any created virtue. Therefore it seems that the soul itself, during the work of the six days, when all things were made, was created together with the angels, and that afterwards, by its own will, was joined to the service of the body. Now, you can see this is problematic, and Thomas is like, Augustine, seriously? I mean, remember how much Augustine was influenced by Plato? So he says, but he does not say this by way of assertion. Okay, so he's starting to play, let's try to figure this out. Let's hopefully not have to disagree with Augustine, as his words prove. For he says, we may believe, if neither scripture nor reason forbid, that man was made on the 6th day, in the sense that his body was created as to its causal virtue in the elements of the world, but that the soul was already created. Okay, so Augustine's saying that there is some separation in time between the creation of the soul and the creation of the body. Now, Thomas is going to have to say, oh, wow, what am I going to do? I got to disagree with Augustine here. Now, this could be upheld by those who hold that the soul has of itself a complete species and nature, and that it is not united to the body as its form, but as its administrator. Okay, that's Plato. But if the soul is united to the body as its form and is naturally a part of human nature, the above supposition is quite impossible. So there you go. He disagreed with Augustine. For it is clear that God made the first things in their perfect natural state, as their species required. Now the soul, as part of human nature, has its natural perfection only as united to the body. Therefore, it would have been unfitting for the soul to be created without the body. So take that, Augustine. Aquinas just disagreed with you. Therefore, if we admit the opinion of Augustine about the work of the 6 days, we may say that the human soul proceeded in the work of the 6 days by a certain generic similitude. So he's still trying to massage this and say, is there any chance that we could agree with Augustine at all, so far as it had intellectual nature in common with the angels, but was itself created at the same time as the body? According to the other saints, both the body and soul of the first man were produced in the work of the 6 days. So he's saying, oh, this is painful. I got to disagree with Augustine, but the other church fathers did as well. So Aquinas is going to jump on that bandwagon and disagree with him as well. Well, that is question number 90. I hope you enjoyed it on the first production of man's soul. And in the next one, we're going to talk about his body, and then we're going to talk about the production of women, and then talk about some specifics about Adam and Eve, the creation of the first, people, and it really gets very interesting. So thanks for joining me on this journey through the Summa, one question at a time. And St. Thomas Aquinas, please pray for us. God bless you.